Hi, I'm Laura and this is Trip Trilogy and happy Dr. Seuss Day! I wanted to post on this special occasion, which is why I broke with my usual upload schedule, and today I thought I'd discuss Dr. Seuss's little known adult picture book, The 7 Lady Godivas, The True Facts Concerning History's Barest Family, a picture book featuring 7 naked ladies. So I want to give a bit of history about this book because I think it's pretty interesting. The 7 Lady Godivas is actually Dr. Seuss's 4th book he ever had published. It is the first adult book he ever published and the first of 2 books that he wrote that ever went out of print. And for this book, it happened rather quickly. It was published by Random House originally in 1939. And long story short, it was a flop. 2 reasons this book might have failed when it came to sales are it was originally $2, which was quite expensive for the Depression era it was published in. And though this book was advertised as having naked women and being for adults, it was pretty tame. Like, if someone wanted to look at a bunch of drawings of naked ladies, this would not be their first choice. This is the least sexual nudity I have ever seen. Dr. Seuss, your drawing style just isn't sexy. Dr. Seuss said he tried to draw the sexiest looking woman he could, but they came out just ridiculous. And yeah, I have to agree, they look more silly than sexy. Now, I do think this book was intended to be more silly and to make people smile as opposed to being sexy, but it also was the Great Depression era and people weren't really in the mood for a silly book. In fact, Dr. Seuss had misgivings about this book before it was even published. And you can see that he had these misgivings by looking at his end papers. On the end paper, you can see a bucket of sap on the family tree that says Bennett Cerf, who was his publisher at Random House, which was Dr. Seuss's way of calling Bennett a sap for publishing this book in the first place. Of the original 10,000 copies printed of this book, only 2,500 were sold, and the book ended up being remaindered, which means the remaining copies of the book are sold by the publisher for a reduced price at a loss to try to get some of the money they invested into the book back. So the first edition of this book was liquidated and ended up being sold at drugstores for about 25 cents. The only other book to come close to this was The Cat in the Hat Songbook, which was the only other Dr. Seuss book to go out of print. The failure of this book is probably one of the reasons why Dr. Seuss said he would rather write for kids, and that adults are obsolete children and the hell with them, which that quote, funnily enough, is incorporated into the title of Dr. Seuss's only other adult book, You're Only Old Once, a book for obsolete children, which was published in 1986, which was a year before 1987 when this book was reissued by multitudinous demand. I've never seen that word before. This was because Dr. Seuss had become very popular and people actually wanted to read this book now. And obviously based on this reissued print, I got a reissued book, not an original edition, which can sell for up to $500. I'm not paying that. I got my copy for less than $6 on Amazon, and it was labeled as very good quality, which I find debatable because this entire corner is bent, and it was worse bent, in fact, and I had to fix it some. So this seems more like good quality than very good quality. Amazon, or actually it's the seller, not necessarily Amazon. Also, it came late, but luckily before Dr. Seuss Day, so I'm fine. However, while the cover is clearly different, stating on the front that it's reissued, and talking about the original publication of it on the inside flap, the rest of the book, besides the cover, seems to be the same as the original story. Now, I've never read an original first edition of this book, so that's me guessing, but I'm assuming it's just the outside that was changed. So a couple critiques I have on the formatting of my new issue is that I don't like the new cover. Now, there's nothing wrong with this drawing. However, it is the very first scene in this book. So it's repetitive, whereas the original cover, which you can see here, is a completely original drawing specifically for the cover of the book. And I don't see the point of repeating a drawing within the book when you already have one specifically for the cover, especially because I do like Dr. Seuss's artwork. I think that's part of the reason why this is such a nice collectible, and having one less drawing of his because they wanted to just copy the inside of the book seems kind of disappointing to me. Also because I think the original cover was better. The other cover had all 7 of the sisters riding a horse, which I feel is more explicit about what the story is about, because this whole story is about them learning truths about horses, whereas this is just 7 naked girls and some old knight dude. This isn't actually what the story is about. The story is about the girls learning facts about horses. So this cover isn't any more accurate to the story, and it's a repetitive drawing, so I dislike that they changed it and got rid of the original artwork. Also, my other critique is the formatting of this book. It is 80 pages. There are no page numbers in this entire book. Now, I understand if the original book did not have page numbers and they wanted this to be more exact, I can appreciate that. However, I just don't like it when books don't have page numbers. So, if the original didn't have them, I guess they want to be accurate, but why did the original not have them in the first place is also my next question. And the only reason I know it's 80 pages is because that's what Wikipedia said. I actually counted the pages and counted 79. So I missed one apparently. I might have started later than when they considered the starting page. I don't know. Also though, when it comes to formatting, if you take off the dust jackets of this book, which I believe everything besides that seems to be pretty accurate to the original, it has this pretty stamp on it, which I really like. I definitely think this is cute. It's the symbol on the back of this. But yeah, I just appreciate that. Anyway, let's talk about what the book is actually about, because that's what really matters when it comes to books. So I'm going to be reading the foreword. History has treated no name so shabbily as it has the name Godiva. Today, Lady Godiva brings to mind a shameful picture. A big blonde nude trotting around the town on a horse. In the background of this picture, there is always Peeping Tom, an illicit snooper with questionable intentions. The author feels that the time has come to speak. There was not one, there were 7 Lady Godivas, and their nakedness actually was not a thing of shame. So far as Peeping Tom is concerned, he never really peeped. Peeping was merely the old family name, and Tom and his 6 brothers bore it with pride. A beautiful story of love, honor, and scientific achievement has too long been gathering dust in the archives. Dr. Seuss, Coventry, 1939. Dun, dun. So yes, this is a very loose telling of the original legend of the Lady Godiva, which I realize I've been saving Godiva for the beginning half of this video, so I'm sure people might have clicked off because they were enraged. So the original legend of the Lady Godiva has her riding through the streets of Coventry naked when her husband, Lord Leofric, I don't know if I pronounced that right, made the taxes too harsh for the citizens, and in order to have him lower them, she kept saying, hey, you should lower them, until he got so annoyed, and he's like, if you ride through the streets naked, I will lower them. And she's like, deal. So then she tells everyone in the town to close their doors and windows while she rode through the town naked with only her hair to cover her, and then everyone did as told and didn't look, except in later versions of the legend, there is Peeping Tom, who did look, and because of this, he was struck blind or dead. It depends on the version. Also, though Lady Godiva was real, this legend isn't recorded to have appeared until 2 centuries after her death, so it's probably just a legend. And this retelling is very, very loose. The only similarities it has to the original legend is the name Godiva, Coventry, and Peeping Tom, and the relevance of horses to the story. In fact, I think horses are more relevant to this version of the story, which is why There should have been a horse on the cover. Also, the fact that the ladies in this story are naked like the original story. However, whereas in the original legend, she was naked because she was trying to get the taxes lowered, in this version, they're just nudists and they're naked all the time. And the reason they're naked all the time in the story is explained because they don't bother with frivolities. To quote, they were simply themselves and chose not to disguise it. Which means they're just casually naked the whole time and no one really thinks anything of it. Even at one point when one of them walks through the snow, which is terrifying if you're really thinking of it, but it's a adult Dr. Seuss picture book, so it's not that big a deal. Don't think about the snow part too hard. But other than the snow thing, it was pretty normal. It was fine. I will say Dr. Seuss's art style is way too silly to be sexy. However, I think I actually preferred that. I don't think I would really feel comfortable reviewing this book if the pictures were realistic. And this is about as explicit as it gets. This story is about how their father, the Earl of Coventry, dies in a horse riding accident. And all 7 of the sisters vow to never marry until they learn a truth about horses to make horse riding safer for the rest of humanity. But oh no, they're all betrothed to one of the Peeping brothers, one of whom is named Peeping Tom, but the other ones have different Peeping names. And the rest of the book rotates with different Godivas sisters getting a chapter where it just talks about how they learn a horse truth, each of which correlates to a saying or colloquialism involving horses. However, I'm happy to report none of the sayings were "don't beat a dead horse," because that's the first one I thought of. So I was like, is there going to be dead horse beating in this book? There is not. So what are my thoughts on this book? I do think it's an example of a book eventually succeeding because of the author's notoriety as opposed to the specific book, which is pretty well established from the fact that it wasn't really popular when it was first published, but once it became famous, people wanted his backlist and thought it was interesting to collect. And at the end of the day, I do think this book is very much a collectible as opposed to a must-read work of literature. Honestly, my favorite part of this book are the funny Dr. Seuss drawings, especially the full-page ones. Depicting scenes, I definitely like those the best. I enjoy his artwork and it does give me a sense of nostalgia. And it's honestly just cool seeing more of his artwork for different things because I've seen a lot of his old stories, but I haven't seen this. And seeing him draw something vastly different is interesting to see. His art style is very distinct and I haven't seen anyone's like it unless they're specifically trying to draw like him. And I actually liked how silly the art and story was. And though the woman not being sexy did probably hurt the original sales, I personally prefer that when reading now because I kind of wanted this book more as a silly collectible. And I prefer the more PG nudity that focuses on the shenanigans that the sisters get up to. I especially like the end pages showing the sisters' family tree. I think these are really cool and I love how at the end of each of the sisters' branches are different famous horse-related people that are supposed to be their descendants. Also, a cute little tidbit is that at the end of Mitzi's branch, you can see a tiny little berry that says Dr. Seuss. Do you see it right there? He's the descendant of Mitzi. Also, from what I heard, one of the goals of this story was to depict a variety of women, which I think he did a good job of. I appreciate how different each of them looks, and I do think looking at the pages, I can tell them apart. They each have their own unique hairstyle, and some of them have their own body types. And though Dr. Seuss did try to make them sexy, he completely failed in every way. There's literally nothing sexy about his drawings of these women. Like, it's kind of charming how unsexy his drawings are. Like, it's like, how do you pull that off? They're literally naked. But yeah, I do actually really like his drawings, but not for the reason he intended. Even though the characters were supposed to look sexy, I do overall think the story was still meant to be silly. Also though, I'm sure you noticed when I was showing you the end papers, but there is an overweight sister named Teeny who as you can see, isn't on the horse, she's carrying it. And there are 2 pages with a little bit of fat jokes in them. However, I will say I don't think they were excessive or mean-spirited, but they are present in the story. However, this is a Great Depression era book that is meant to be for adults, so it's actually pretty tame considering that. However, if that will bother you or turn you off the book, it is there. And I kind of felt like I had to address it because I kind of shoved it in your face when I was showing you this app. So now let's discuss the story and writing. I chuckled out loud multiple times, so I did find this book funny. I also enjoyed seeing how the different horse-related expressions were incorporated into the story and in a very literal and funny way. And I also found it interesting which ones he chose, because I didn't know all of them. And again, the first one I think of is Beat a Dead Horse, which would be kind of dark for this book. I mean, it does start with him dying, and there is one confirmed horse casualty. But other than that, it's not meant to be dark. I like learning about expressions and their origins, so it was funny reading a book that spoofed that. And I was constantly curious about how each scenario would go and what the next scenario would be. I don't think this is for everyone, but given the fact that it isn't the most crazy exciting book, however, I will say compared to Dr. Seuss's normal writing, this is pretty basic prose. His signature rhymes are absent, and though his normal voice does sometimes peek through within the writing, overall the writing is pretty straightforward and plain, which compared to his usual writing style, it was definitely less fun. Still, I was never bored, and part of that was just because it was such a quick read. It gives pretty straightforward summaries of the events the sisters are doing without much detail, and the main focus is the drawings with it. Overall, this book isn't anything spectacular. Though the concept for an adult picture book is kind of fun, it lacked adult themes or depth. There were brief implications of sexual desire, but nothing crazy, and it wasn't the same as an exploration of adult themes. And I honestly think this book is perfectly fine for teens to read. The goal was to write a silly book, which was successful. However, it wasn't hilarious, but it was silly. And it did make me smile and again chuckle. It had the usual amount of detail for a picture book, with quick explanations of what the characters were doing, with some dialogue. However, again, for Dr. Seuss, the prose were pretty basic, nothing exceptional. The story didn't have any overarching theme or moral that was particularly crazy that I noticed. And I will say the ratio of pictures to words was a bit off for me at times. I felt like there were times at pages like this where it felt blank and there should have been a picture here too, along with this side. And again, if you look at this one, this page ends and there's literally one sentence and no pictures, which honestly to me felt like a missed opportunity, because again, the point of a picture book is for the pictures to help tell the story along with the words. And on pages where there really isn't any illustration to go with the words, it just feels a bit lazy. However, despite my critiques, I am glad I read it and I did enjoy my reading experience, and part of it is from the novelty of the book though, not the actual work itself. Because the truth is, some of the appeal of this book is, oh my gosh, Dr. Seuss wrote an adult book with naked ladies? That's crazy. And though the actual story is fun, it's not a masterpiece. I did kind of like seeing the different sisters' little discoveries and the sayings being incorporated. And again, I do think his artwork is as good as it always is in other stories, just sometimes lacking as it is on this page, and not particularly sexy as it was intended to be. Though it was still pretty fun. Like this picture, I really like this picture. It's a nice picture. And I definitely think if I was reading this book without this picture, it would be so much less fun. These drawings brought the scenes to life in a way that only Dr. Seuss can with his art style, and in a way that these pretty average prose could not. To be honest, I don't think I would have liked anyone else's art style with this story that wasn't Dr. Seuss. Like, I'm here for Dr. Seuss's art style. In conclusion, I am glad I got to read this book, and I plan on keeping it as part of my collection of books. Personally, I would like to read every single Dr. Seuss book one day because I know there are some that I missed, and it would be nice to have a full collection of them. since most of them are pretty small and I can actually read them, I wouldn't mind owning quite a bit of them. And the moment I heard he wrote an adult book with naked women, I immediately was like, I gotta share it with you guys. I'm sure a lot of you will be shocked to learn about this like I was, because I honestly never expected this book to exist. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this book? Do you have a favorite Dr. Seuss book? If so, what is your favorite Dr. Seuss book? I remember in elementary school my teacher made us green eggs and ham, and it was delicious and I loved it. So ever since then, green eggs and ham has had a special soft spot in my heart. And I don't own that one. I don't know where our family's copy is, but apparently it's one of my sisters. Anyway, please tell me all your thoughts below, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.